Hello friends, welcome to this video on the discussion of returns under GST. Returns are nothing but a mode of furnishing information about the state of affairs of the business to the regulatory authorities. Almost every act, finance related act, has this concept of returns. If you take income tax has the concept of returns, GST laws has the concept of returns, even the previous acts, now abolished acts, which is VAT Act or Service Tax Act, whatever the act, finance related acts you take, every act has the concept of returns. Returns actually helps the regulatory authorities to monitor the transactions or the earnings of any business, and that is the way a registered person can communicate the state of affairs of business to the regulatory authorities. Through that mode, the authorities may have a hold on the business transactions. Under GST, there are multiple types of returns. In general, returns only act as a way of furnishing information to the regulatory authorities. Most of the time, it acts as a single mode of communication, where the registered person would communicate the details of either income or supplies to the authorities. But under GST, they have tried to change the very basic nature of returns, and they have tried to make the return as a communication between one to the regulatory authorities and also between the supplier and the recipient of supply. Because under GST, the returns are not only gives communication or the information to the department, it also provides information to the recipient of supply, so that the supplier and recipient can also be in the same books. They can also record the transactions in a same manner, so that the value or the amount of transaction does not differ between the books of supplier and as well as the books of recipient. That is the main difference in the concept of returns under GST as compared to other returns related to other financial acts. Under GST law, return is actually defined under section 2 clause 97. The section defines the meaning of return as any return that are prescribed under the act or rules. Return that are prescribed under the act or rules, and that return has to be furnished by a registered person. Only a person who is registered under GST law can furnish the returns to the authorities. Not every person or every citizen of the nation needs to file the return. Let us now then get into the relevant provisions of the Act. Section 37 of CGST Act mainly deals with furnishing of returns. Section 37 to section 48, that is the chapter which deals with filing of returns, claiming of input tax credit in returns, as well as the provisions relating to GST practitioner. But we shall restrict our discussion to the various types of returns, and we will try to cover the entire provisions, not in a manner of through the structure of sections, but through the structure of concept. Now we are going to discuss each and every types of return, what is the nature of return, what is the purpose of return, and the frequency of the return to be filed, and what is the nature of person to whom the return is applicable, and if there are any exception to the return, that also we will be discussing in this table. So this table has 3 columns. First columns gives you information regarding the name of the return form, whether the form is whether active or not currently, and what is the due date that the form has to be filed, And column 2 gives you information about the nature of person to whom that particular return is applicable, and what are all the types of transaction has to be furnished in that return. And column 3 gives you if there are any exception to this in the nature, either in the nature of person or in the nature of supply. Exception could be whether any person is type of person is exempted to file this return, or any particular nature which are related to the type of transaction we are furnishing, but it has to be exempted by way of provisions. That is what we are going to discuss now. Under the GST Act, the authorities, when they have tried to implement the Act, the authorities have foreseen to make this return more effective and exclusive. But till date, not all the returns have been implemented to the true nature and spirit, or in the intent behind the implementation of the provisions. But there are certain returns which are active now, and which are very effective and solves the purpose of it. The first form or the first return now we are going to discuss is GSTR1. GSTR denotes nothing but goods and service tax return. That is what you will be called, commonly referring to GSTR, and the number will differ based on the type of return. The first return we are discussing is GSTR1, and the status of that return is active now. The GSTR1 has been made implemented from the day one of the Act being implemented, that is 1st of July 2017. From that day, GSTR1 is effective, and GSTR1 is actually filed within 10th of the following month. 10th of the month, following month, or the following quarter, depends on the nature of person and the frequency of filing returns. The nature of person to whom GSTR1 is applicable is every registered person. Every person who is registered under the GST Act has to file this GSTR1, subject to there are certain exemptions to it. Then what is the nature of supply that is reported under GSTR1 is the taxable outward supplies. Whatever the outward supplies that are taxable in nature, that would be reported under GSTR1. It is only specific to reporting of outward taxable supplies. Any inward supplies will not be reported under GSTR1. It is exclusively for reporting or furnishing information about outward taxable supplies, and that has to be furnished within 10th of the following month or quarter, whatever is applicable. And this particular return is provided under the Act under section 37 subsection 1. So that section speaks about furnishing of outward supplies to the authorities. Then we will see who are all exempted to file this return. The first person is the input service distributor. We have already discussed the concept of input service distributor and what is the nature of supplies they make. So those type of persons are not required to file this GSTR1, input service distributor. Second is the non-resident taxable person. So non-resident taxable person is also not required to file this GSTR1. See, the person I am listing out here are actually exempted to file only GSTR1. That doesn't mean they are exempted to file any type of return under GST, because there are another type of return or another form which are prescribed for these type of persons here. So second is non-resident taxable person. Third is composition taxpayer. Fourth is the deductor, who is a TDS deductor or a collector of TCS under GST law. Fifth is the supplier of OIDER services. OIDER services as per section 14 of IGST. We also already discussed about OIDER services in our classes and videos. OIDER services are nothing but online information and database access and retrieval services. So this person will also not file GSTR1. There is a separate another form for the OIDA service provider. So that is all about GSTR1. GSTR1 is for the purpose of furnishing details about outward supplies. Outward supplies has to be furnished in GSTR1. That has to be furnished within 10th of the following month or quarter. That is first return. Second return is GSTR2. So GSTR2 is currently inactive. It has not been implemented by the authorities till date. GSTR2 was initially intended for the purpose of recipient to confirm the outward taxable supplies. See, this works in this manner. We just discussed about GSTR1. In GSTR1, the supplier will report all the outward taxable supplies in GSTR1, and the outward taxable supplies can be divided into two categories. One is supply in the nature of B2B supplies and supply in the nature of B2C supplies. B2B supplies are nothing but business to business supplies, and business to customer supplies or consumer supplies. That is B2C supplies. In case of B2B supplies, the supplier has to provide the GST number of the recipient of supply in the case of B2B supply, because the supply is made to another business. The another business may or may not be a registered person, but if it is another business, then it has to be reported under B2B supplies. Under B2B supplies, we have to the supplier has to mandatorily provide the recipient's GST number. Once the recipient's GST number is provided by the supplier in his GSTR1, immediately that particular supply will be notified to the recipient. It will be available for the recipient to refer. In which form the supply will be available to the recipient is the form is GSTR2A. That is what it is provided in the next row. GSTR2A is the form through which the recipient can view or verify the nature of supplies the supplier has reported in GSTR1. GSTR2A is only a read-only return. It is only for the informational purpose. There is nothing to file in GSTR2A. After the recipient of supply, after he verifies the inward supplies which he have received during the period in GSTR2A, if there are any modifications, if there are any differences, or if there are any other alterations which he wants to make in that in the supplies reported by the supplier, he has to then file a form called GSTR2. The differences or alterations to be done in GSTR2A can be made only in GSTR2. That is the purpose of GSTR2. But till date, GSTR2 is not actually implemented by the Act or not being affected by the authorities. So that is the reason it is not relevant as of today. But the GSTR2 has to be filed within 15th of the following month. It means what? After the supplier files in GSTR1, there is a 5-day window provided to the recipient to refer GSTR2A and confirm in GSTR2 whether the supplies reported by the supplier are true and correct, or it is fine. It is also the correct from the side of recipient of supply. That is the intention behind these two forms. So who has to file this GSTR2 is again every registered person, and the exception to that is the person who are not required to file GSTR1 are also not required to file GSTR2. This form is for the purpose of accept or reject the inward supplies. If they want to add certain inward supplies which the supplier has missed to report it, that can also be done by way of alteration to GSTR2. That is the true purpose of GSTR2. Then we also discussed about GSTR2A. GSTR2A is an informative return. So GSTR2A is not a regular return that is to be filed by any taxpayer. It is only a read-only type of document which is only for the informational purpose. As said, GSTR2 is a statement of receipt or supply, and details of any inward supplies as reported by the supplier, that is the in GSTR1, has to be either confirmed or it can be referred by the recipient of supply. Then comes the form called GSTR3. GSTR3 was intended to be an automated form. It is a form on which the information is supplied through GSTR1 and GSTR2. So it was just a statement or a format in which both the supply, that is outward supply, and as well as the inward supply will be populated in GSTR3, and that can be referred or verified by verified by the registered person, and after his confirmation he can just submit that form to the authorities. It is just for the confirmational purpose, because the information for GSTR3 is supplied only from GSTR1 and GSTR2, because in GSTR1 outward supplies are actually already been reported, and GSTR2 inward supplies are confirmed by the registered person. Once these two are done, then the taxpayer has to file the form called GSTR3, and it was intended that the information will be purely flown from GSTR1 and GSTR2. There was no much window, except one or two exceptions. There was no much window for the person to actually fill in any details in that. So that was the purpose of GSTR3, and it was intended to be filed on 20th of the following month. So the sequence is in this manner: GSTR1 will be filed on 10th of the month, GSTR2 will be filed on 15th of the month, and after 5 days of window provided to the registered person, GSTR3 will be filed. That was the true intention. But unfortunately till date GSTR3 was not being made effective by the authorities because of various technical glitches, or authorities need so much time to set up their infrastructure to support all these types of returns. So maybe that is the reason the GSTR3 was not being made effective till date. So this is the true nature of this return and the purpose of the returns to be filed. So that is the next return which we are going to discuss is GSTR3B. GSTR3B is nothing but a supplementary return, or could be, you can even say that temporary return in place of GSTR3, because GSTR3 the information will be flown only from GSTR1 and GSTR2. It is only an automated return. But since the infrastructure is not ready to support GSTR3, the authorities have introduced a new form as a temporary form called GSTR3B. In GSTR3B, the purpose of return is same, but with only one difference is that the information is manual information is filled in manually. The taxpayer has to on his self-assessment basis, the taxpayer has to provide the details of outward supplies as well as the details of inward supplies in GSTR3B. It has to be done manually rather than it was intended to be automated through GSTR3. They have only made it as a manual input for GSTR3B, and once the taxpayer declares his outward supplies and inward supplies manually in GSTR3B, he will be filing that form to the authorities. The due date for GSTR3B is as same as GSTR3 only. For filing this GSTR3B, the form GSTR2A can be referred by the taxpayer, and manually he can pull out the information from GSTR2A about the inward supplies, and that can be filled in GSTR3B. And we already discussed in the input credit chapter that along with whatever is provided under GSTR2A, the taxpayer also has a window to put additional inward supplies which was missed to be reported in the returns by the supplier. He can also put additional inward supplies to the extent of 10%, in excess of the inward supplies mentioned in GSTR 2A. That window is also available, that we have already discussed in our input tax credit chapter. So this is the true nature of the GSTR 3B. Next form we are going to discuss is GSTR 4. GSTR 4 is only for taxpayer who are into this composition scheme, who are called as composition taxpayer. For those persons, this form is provided, this form is notified, GSTR 4. GSTR 4 is also currently active now, and it will be filed only once in a year. The composition taxpayer has to file this form once in a year, and when it has to be filed is within 30th of April after the financial year has ended. After the financial year has got over, within 1 month, that is 30th of April, the composition taxpayer has to file this GSTR 4. The nature of this form is to provide a consolidated information about the outward supplies made by the composition taxpayer, and it also acts as a consolidation of the quarterly returns which the composition taxpayer makes. The form for quarterly returns, which we will be discussing in our next slide, but this is a yearly once return that has to be filed by a composition taxpayer. It acts as a consolidated return which the composition taxpayer has made every quarter during the financial year. This particular return also applies to not only for the composition taxpayer but also for persons who are under the composition scheme based on notification 2/2019 dated 1/3/2019. We already discussed about this notification and the person to whom this notification applies in our classes, where we discussed the composition scheme. So GSTR 4 is for a composition taxpayer. Next is GSTR 5. GSTR 5 is also currently active, and GSTR 5 will be reported, or it will be filed on 20th of the following month, or it will be filed within 7 days of expiry of the casual registration. So this is for GSTR 5, and to whom this GSTR 5 is applicable is to the non-resident taxable person. We already saw that non-resident taxable person will not be required to file GSTR 1. The relevant form for non-resident taxable person is GSTR 5. Non-resident taxable person will have very few supplies that will be made in India. He may either be a regular registered person, or he may even take a casual registration. Let us now briefly understand what is casual registration. Casual registration is not like a regular registration. If a person is going to conduct business, or he is going to provide supplies only for a temporary period, he is going to supply only for a shorter period, he need not go for a regular registration. There is another concept called casual registration, on which he can be a casual registered person. He can take a casual registration and provide the services only for that period of time mentioned in the registration. Once that period got over, it gets expired, he will no longer be called as a registered person. But during the time of the casual registration is in force, all the provisions of the act which applies to a regular registered person will also apply to a casual registered person. But the only difference is he is not a permanently registered under GST. He is only registered for a shorter period of time, which is mentioned in the while he takes the registration itself. So if a non-resident taxable person is a casual registered person, then he has to file this GSTR 5 upon expiry of the time mentioned in the casual registration. Within 7 days from that expiry date, he has to file this GSTR 5. So this form is for the purpose of furnishing information about all the inward supplies and outward supplies made by the non-resident taxable person. This form does not apply to any other person or any other registered person. This form even does not apply to a normal casual taxable person as well. It applies specifically and exclusively for non-resident taxable person. Next is GSTR 6. GSTR 6 is for input service distributor. So this form is also active as on date, and this form will be filed on or before 13th of the following month. Whatever the credits that are being distributed and whatever the ITC availed by the input service distributor during the month, that has to be reported in GSTR 6 on or before 13th of the following month. This return is also active as on date, and the details that has to be furnished is the amount of ITC availed during the month and the amount of ITC that are distributed to various units during the month. So this is GSTR 6. Then GSTR 7. GSTR 7 is for the person who are registered as a deductor, tax deductor under GST. Person who deducts TDS for under GST. So that those person has to report the number of transactions or the total transactions on which he has deducted TDS, and that has to be reported under GSTR 7, and amount of TDS deducted has to be paid to the government. This form also has to be filed within on or before 10th of the following month. Whatever the TDS he has deducted and whatever the transactions on which the TDS being deducted during the month has to be reported to the authorities on or before 10th of the following month, and through form GSTR 7, whatever the TDS deducted has to be paid to the government. So this form is exclusively for person who is registered as a tax deductor under this act. So because the person who is a tax deductor has to separately register under this person, he is not a person who is in a normal registration. Even person who is registered under normal provisions of the act has to separately take registration if he has to do any tax deductions. Next form is GSTR 8. GSTR 8 is for the person who is into the business of e-commerce trade. So we already know that an e-commerce supplier has to collect taxes at source, because he has to register himself as a TCS person, tax collector, and that is exclusively applicable for an e-commerce operator. And whatever the details of inward supplies and outward supplies the e-commerce operator has made during the month has to be reported in GSTR 8. The applicable form for the e-commerce operator is GSTR 8. He will not be filing any GSTR 1. So GSTR 8 also has to be filed within 10th of the following month, and whatever tax collected during the month has to be paid to the government. So this form is exclusively applicable to e-commerce operator to whom this TCS provision is applicable. Next is GSTR 9. GSTR 9 form is also active as on date, and this form is applicable to every registered person. Every registered person has to file this GSTR 9. GSTR 9 can also be called as annual return. It is the annual return. It has to be filed by all the taxable person once in a year. When this form has to be filed is 31st, on or before 31st December of the next financial year. I will give an example. If the financial year for which this form has to be filed is for financial year 2019-20, the due date to file this form is 31st December 2020. Immediately the following financial year, 31st December is the last date or due date to file this GSTR 9. The purpose of filing this GSTR 9 is nothing but to provide the details of total income and expenses that are as per the financial. It is they have to provide the details about the income and expenses reported in their financial statements for the year, and that has to be reported in GSTR 9, and it has to be also compared with all the GSTR 1 and GSTR 2 filed during the year, because in GSTR 1 every outward supply is reported. That means what, in financials it has to match with the revenue or sales reported in financials. It has to match with the total of GSTR 1 filed during the year, monthly during the year, and that has to be reported in GSTR 9 after comparing with the financials. Also GSTR 2 or GSTR 2A confirms the inward supplies. So in financials, whatever the purchases been reported, that has to match with GSTR 2 file during the entire year. Since GSTR 2 is not effective as on date, we have to just compare with GSTR 2A and GSTR 3B. So it is, to say in a plain words, it is nothing but a consolidated form of all GSTR 1, GSTR 2A and GSTR 3B of the entire financial year. So this is applicable to every registered person, but there are exceptions to it. Person who are not required to file GSTR 1 is also not required to file GSTR 9. So it means what, GSTR 9 is applicable only to persons to whom GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B is applicable. It is not applicable to any other person like casual taxable person or non-resident taxable person or ISD. For these type of persons, this GSTR 9 does not apply. So then comes the form GSTR 9A. GSTR 9A is currently inactive and it has also been waived off up to March ended 2019. About 2020 they are yet to notify, but up to 2019 March it has been waived off. That is, it has not been effective at all. This is just GSTR 9A. This GSTR 9A is applicable to composition taxpayer, and the composition taxpayer has to provide the total details of outward supplies, total details of inward and outward supplies, and it is just act as a consolidation of all quarterly returns. We also already saw the GSTR 4 is provided for that purpose. That is the reason GSTR 9A is not been effective and it has been waived off, because both these forms solves the similar purpose. So to whom this form is not applicable is other than composition taxpayer. So the next form we are going to see is GSTR 9C. GSTR 9C also applies to every registered person to whom GSTR 1, GSTR 3B and GSTR 9 is applicable. We can simply say that the person who has filed GSTR 9 has to file GSTR 9C also. But only difference is, not all the person to whom GSTR 9 is applicable, GSTR 9C will also apply. It will apply only to persons who has a turnover of more than 2 crores during the financial year. If the turnover is more than 2 crores during the financial year, then the taxpayer has to file this form also, which is called as GSTR 9C. But for GSTR 9 there is no threshold of no turnover threshold prescribed. All the person who has filed GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B has to file GSTR 9. It is like a annual return and consolidated return of the entire financial year. But GSTR 9C is only for person to whom audit is applicable under GST. It is like a audit, a GST audit. GST audit is applicable only to person who has a turnover of more than 2 crore rupees, and to whom this GST audit is applicable, that person has to file this form called GSTR 9C. GSTR 9C is for the purpose of a reconciliation between the financials as well as the monthly returns submitted by the taxpayer. It acts as a reconciliation, and these reconciliation and the turnover reported under GSTR 9 has to be certified by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. He has to audit the books and he has to certify the turnover as well as the inward supplies under GSTR 9C. After the GSTR 9C has to be submitted along with the certificate from a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. So this is the purpose of GSTR 9C, and as told before, GSTR 9C will not even apply to person to whom GSTR 9 is applicable. So we can simply say that GSTR 9, to whom and all GSTR 9 is applicable, for those all those persons GSTR 9C will also apply. But the only difference is if that person has a turnover of less than 2 crore rupees, then GSTR 9C will not apply, only GSTR 9 will apply. If that particular person has turnover of more than 2 crores, then he has to file GSTR 9 as well as GSTR 9C. Both these form apply to that person. So next form is GSTR 10. GSTR 10 is called as final return. It is the final return. This return has to be filed only once by a taxpayer during his entire tenure of being a registered person, because this form will be filed only after the cancellation of registration or surrender of registration by the taxpayer. This is a final return, one return which he has to file, and this return has to be filed within 3 months from the date of cancellation of registration. So within 3 months this return has to be filed. This return serves the purpose only for the purpose of furnishing information about the input tax credit availed on whatever the inputs available on the previous day from the date of cancellation. So whatever the inputs available in stock as well as the ITC availed on those inputs has to be reported in this return. That is the main purpose of this return, and this return will be filed within 3 months from the date of cancellation, and this return is called as final return, and the form is GSTR 10. So this the cancellation, the type of cancellation which we are referring here is all types of cancellation. Either the cancellation could be on voluntary basis, or cancellation may be by authorities, or cancellation by any other reason. Whatever the reason the cancellation has happened, this form is mandatory for the person to file within 3 months from the date of cancellation. Next form is GSTR 11. GSTR 11 is also currently active. It will be filed on or before 28th of the following month. 28th of the following month. This form is applicable only to person to whom UIN is allotted by the authorities. UIN is unique identification number. So that is if that UIN is allotted by the authorities to any person, that person has to file this form. This form has to be filed within on or before 28th of the following month. The nature of information to be provided under this form is details of inward supplies for claiming refund. I will give you an example. If any foreigner visits to India on any tour or for any other reasons, and he does any purchase in India, and that goods is taken away from India, he is taking it to his own home country. In that reason, when he makes the purchase in India, he will be paying a GST on it. And upon taking that goods to outside India, it means that it is like an export. It will be treated like an export, and GST will not be applicable on goods that are taken outside India before the package is removed. It should not be used in India. It has to be purchased in India, and it has to be directly taken out outside India. In those cases, the GST he paid upon purchase is refundable to the particular person. So that person can apply for a UIN, and the government will allot a UIN upon purchase. Based on that UIN, he can claim a refund by filing this form called GSTR 11. So the next form is CMP08. CMP08, till now whatever the form we have seen is named as GSTR, but this form is unique. It is named as CMP. By the name of the form, we can know that this form is applicable only for a composition taxpayer. Composition taxpayer, that is denoted as CMP. CMP08. This form is also currently active, and this form has to be filed within on or before 18th of the following month from the end of the quarter. This is a quarterly return. This return has to be filed by a composition taxpayer, and the due date to file this return is 18th of the following month from the end of the quarter. So when I say composition taxpayer, also person who are falling under notification 2/2019 also has to file this form. So this form is just only for the, it's a regular return for the composition taxpayer. He has to provide all the outward supplies he has made during the quarter, and he has to calculate taxes on that supply, which is called as turnover, and that tax has to be paid on or before filing this form. This form is only for that purpose and for composition taxpayer. So with this we have almost covered what the different types of returns that are prescribed under GST law. So almost all the returns are covered here except one or few that is only specific for any event. So except that, all the types of returns are covered under this table. Now what we are going to discuss is some of the points, some of other miscellaneous points related to all these returns that are very specific or very important to note. The first point is first return. First return is nothing but any taxpayer who after get himself registered under GST law, the first return which he will be filing, either it could be GSTR 1 or it could be GSTR 4 if he is a composition taxpayer, whatever the return may be. On the first return he has to report all the outward supplies which he has made from the date of registration till the date of filing the return. That is well known, he has to file that. But this particular provision says that he, along with those supplies, he also has to include the amount of supplies which he has made from the date he is liable to get registered under the Act till the date the registration has been granted. Whatever the outward supplies he has made during this time, that also has to be included in the first return. Though it falls outside the period of filing this return, if it falls before that as well, but it has to be filed because of this provision. So that is the basic provision under first return. Next provision we are going to discuss, or some of the points we are going to discuss, is about annual return. Annual return we already discussed. It is in form GSTR 9 and GSTR 9C for certain persons. And annual return in form GSTR 9 has to be filed by all the registered person other than person who are exempted to file GSTR 1, and this return has to be filed on or before 31st of December of the following financial year. And the next one is reconciliation statement in form GSTR 9C has to be filed by every registered person to whom GSTR 9 is applicable, but the only difference is if the turnover is more than 2 crores, then only this GSTR 9C will apply. Or to simply say, the to person to whom GST audit is applicable, then those person has to file this GSTR 9C. The next point is, if this return provides the details of reconciliation of amounts mentioned in monthly returns furnished by the person, and that has to be reconciled with the amounts reported in his financials or books of accounts. GSTR 9C shall also accompany a copy of audited annual accounts. The annual report or the copy of annual financial statements has to be attached while filing this GSTR 9C, and this GSTR 9C has to be certified by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, which we already discussed. So next point we are going to discuss is the revision of returns. Unlike any other law, or to specifically say under like Income Tax Act, in Income Tax Act we have a concept called revised returns. If you file a return and if you find any defect or if you find any mistake in that return, then there is a opportunity available to the taxpayer to file a revised return to correct those mistakes. But under GST there is no concept called revised returns. Once you file a return, you cannot revise that return. If you find any mistake in the return which you have already filed, so that can be claimed only in the subsequent return. Any mistakes, he cannot file any revised return. If there are any tax payable or refundable by the authorities because of the mistake, that would be done after the mistake being corrected in the subsequent return. One another provision under revised under this concept is no mistake of any previous returns can be corrected after the September month's return of the following financial year or filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. So it means what, a return is filed during the financial year and there are any mistakes being done in that particular return. So that mistake can be rectified only up to filing of September month's return of the following financial year or filing of annual return for that financial year, whichever is earlier. He cannot, the mistakes cannot be rectified after filing the September month's return. So that is the last date any particular mistake can be rectified. If the due date, as I mentioned, now has crossed, that mistake can never be rectified at all. So the next concept we are going to discuss is penalty or late fee under the GST Act or interest payable under GST Act. Late fee under GST Act will be paid if there is any delay in filing the returns. It could be any return which we have discussed before. If there are any delay in filing those returns, then we have to pay along with taxes. A late fee also is payable. The amount of late fee is discussed now. Late fee of rupees 100 per day per act, subject to a maximum of 5,000 rupees per act, is payable if any regular returns are filed delayed. It means what? See, if return has to be, the due date to file the return is today and if the return is filed after 10 days, then we have to calculate 100 rupees per day of delay. From today calculated till the date of filing of return, 100 rupees has to be calculated, but subject to a maximum of rupees 5,000 rupees. If the calculation goes beyond 5,000 rupees, then the late fee is restricted to only rupees 5,000. And this 100 rupees or 5,000 rupees is for a single act. It means what, 100 rupees is for CGST law. Similar provisions are available in the state laws as well. So effectively or consolidatively, the total amount of late fee payable is 200 rupees per day or 10,000 rupees is the maximum limit. You can say effectively that is the amount of late fee payable if there is any delay in filing the regular returns. The next one is if there is any delay in filing the annual return. Annual return is GSTR 9 and GSTR 9C. If there is any delay in filing that return, then the amount of late fee payable for the duration of delay is amount of rupees 100 rupees per act, 100 rupees per act, subject to a maximum of 0.25% of the total turnover. The maximum amount is not 5,000 rupees here for annual return. It is 0.25% of the total turnover. So that is the amount of late fee payable for if there is any delay in filing annual returns. So all this late fee which we discussed now is only if there is any supply made during the period. If there is any supply on which tax is payable, either tax is payable or tax is not payable, but if there is any supply made during the period and on that period the filing of return has delayed, then this fee is applicable. If there is no supply made during the month, then also the regular returns has to be filed. It doesn't mean that if there is no supply during the month, it means that you will not file any return. Even there is no supply during the month, the regular return has to be filed. The only difference is that return which you are filing will be called as a nil return, because there will no supply that will be furnished in that return. So for those type of returns, for nil return, if that nil return is filed, if there is any delay in filing that nil return, then a late fee of rupees 50 per day per act for the failure of nil return has to be paid. There is a concessional late fee here, that is rupees 50 per day. but here you can find that the maximum of 5,000 is not provided, so it is only 50 per day, but we can say that maximum 5,000 also to be applied for nil return, because even for return for which supply is made, on that itself they say 5,000 rupees. For nil return it cannot be more than 5,000 rupees, so maximum of 5,000 rupees can be presumed here, even though it is not specifically provided under the act. This is for delay in filing returns. But the department has issued a notification number 76/2018. That notification was issued on 31st December 2018. Through this notification, the department has tried to reduce the amount of late fee payable on delayed filing of delayed returns. They have tried to reduce the amount of late fees just to avoid the burden on the taxpayer. The late fee has been reduced to ₹25 instead of ₹100. ₹25 per day is the amount of late fee that has to be calculated for the entire duration of delay, and ₹25 is for per day and per act. So effectively it is ₹50 for one single day if there is any delay in filing the returns. And this ₹25 or ₹50 which we are speaking now is only for a return for a month on which any supply is made. For example, if there is any supply made and for that any return is filed, if there is any delay in filing the return, then ₹25 per act has to be paid. This is nothing but a replacement of ₹25 instead of ₹100. But if the nature of return is a nil return, and that nil return is filed in a delayed manner, then instead of ₹25 we can say it as ₹10 per day per act. So effectively ₹20 per day has to be paid if the return is a nil return. If the return is a regular return for any supplies to be reported, then ₹50, either ₹50 or ₹20. That is what the late fee payable now for our remembrance purpose. Then for late fee for filing delayed annual returns, we already discussed that late fee of ₹100 per day subject to a maximum of 0.25% of turnover in the state, which we already discussed. So this reduced late fee does not apply to annual returns, it applies only to a regular returns. Then interest on delayed payment of taxes. If there is any delay in payment of taxes, then an interest has to be paid. See, this late fee which we have discussed now is delay in filing the returns, but if there is any delay in payment of taxes, then an interest has to be paid over and above the late fee. The interest is, if the tax payable is not paid, then the interest at the rate of 18% per annum calculated for the duration of default has to be done, and that has to be paid along with the taxes. If that is only if the tax payable is not paid. Second point is, if there are any ITC, that ITC is actually availed mistakenly. If the ITC is availed mistakenly or on a wrong invoice, on wrongly the ITC is availed, then in that case that ITC has to be repaid. For that repayment or for that amount, the interest has to be calculated at the rate of 24%. Instead of 18%, 24% interest has to be paid along with that ITC. So we can clearly understand here, if the regular tax payable, that tax payable is paid delayed, then 18% per annum has to be calculated for the duration of delay, and that has to be paid along with taxes. If the input tax credit is taken in excess, then amount of 24% of interest has to be calculated on that amount, that has to be paid to the department. So this payment of interest is over and above the amount of tax payable, plus over and above the amount of late fee payable if there is any delay in filing the returns as well. So this is all about returns under GST. Now we are going to discuss a small concept called matching, reversal and reclaim of ITC. Matching of ITC is nothing but the taxpayer, if a taxpayer is eligible to claim certain input tax credit, that input tax credit has to be matched with the outward supply of reported by the respective supplier. So there should be a matching has to be happen here, because there could not be any difference in the amount of tax paid by the supplier and amount of input tax credit availed by the recipient. There should not be any difference. It has to match. So that is the concept of this matching. Second is reversal. If there are any excess input tax credit claimed by the recipient, he has to reverse that. And reclaim of ITC. If any amount of ITC that is not being claimed, or it is short claimed by the recipient, then he can claim that excess amount of ITC, that is called as reclaim of ITC. So the relevant section discussing this concept is section 42. Section 42 and section 43 discusses this concept called matching, reversal and reclaim of ITC. So what does section 42 say? Section 42 subsection 1 says matching of ITC. Details of inward supply furnished by recipient has to be matched. The inward supplies that is furnished by recipient has to be matched with what? With the details of outward supplies reported by the corresponding supplier. For example, I have purchased certain goods from a supplier A and I am called as B. So I have in my return I have reported as 1 lakh is the amount that I have received as supplies from A, and the relevant tax to that I have claimed as input tax credit. So that 1 lakh amount and the relevant tax has to be matched with the amount furnished by Mr. A also in his return. So these two has to be matched. If these two are same and it is equal, then it is called as matched and there will not be any issue at all. That is what said here. Details of inward supplies that is reported by the recipient of supply will be matched with the details furnished by the corresponding supplier. That is one. Or with the IGST that is paid on goods that are imported. If the goods are imported, the IGST has to be paid by the recipient of goods only. So in those cases, the recipient of goods after payment of IGST, it is available as credit to him. The amount of credit he avails on payment of IGST on import of goods, that credit has to be matched corresponding with the amount reported by the customs authorities. So that is what the matching does. And second is for any duplication of claims of ITC. For example, any invoice which is claimed twice, there is any duplication in claiming ITC, which is already claimed is claimed again now. So that also will be monitored by the authorities. So the next relevant section is section 42 subsection 3. Subsection 3 speaks about discrepancy in claiming of ITC. For example, under subsection 1, the amount is tried to be matched. If the amount matches, then there is no issue at all. It will be dropped by the authorities. If there is any discrepancy, for example, if the recipient has taken excess ITC than the amount reported by the supplier, here the department will not first know who has made the mistake. See, if the amount does not match, it means that there is a mistake. The mistake could be either by the recipient or by the supplier. Either the supplier could have reported the amount he could have reported might be less, or the recipient would have taken excess ITC. So whatever the case may be, if there is any mismatch, if there is any discrepancy, the department will first send a notice. The notice will be sent to both the persons. The notice will be sent to the supplier as well as the recipient. To the supplier, they will say that the recipient has claimed this much of credit, but you have reported only this much of credit. Kindly verify from your side. The notice sent to recipient will say that the amount of supply reported by the supplier is only this much, but the amount you have claimed as input tax credit is this much. There is a mismatch here. Kindly verify yourself. So there will be a time provided to both these persons. If there is a defect or if there is any mistake at all with either of the person, that person can correct that mistake in the next month's return after receipt of this communication from the department. Because once the discrepancy is noted by the department will immediately send a communication to both these persons. After receiving this communication, both the persons has to verify their books. If there is a mistake in either part of the person, for example, if there is a mistake with the recipient or if there is a mistake with supplier, then the either person has to correct that mistake in the next month's return after receipt of this communication. That is the only time period they have provided. So that is what provided under subsection 5. Next is subsection 7, reduction from output tax liability. For example, if I told you that there is a window available for both the persons to correct their mistake up to the next month's return. In the next month return also, both the persons have not corrected their mistake. Then what the department will do is, department will directly add in the supplier's liability, because this, for example, if the ITC is extra claimed by the supplier, then that excess which is over and above the amount reported by the supplier, the amount claimed by recipient of supply, the ITC claimed by recipient of supply, if it is excess than the amount reported by supplier, then the department, after giving this opportunity, even it is not rectified, then the department will consider the amount reported by supplier as the correct amount. They will assume that the amount furnished by supplier is the correct amount, and whatever the amount taken as ITC by recipient is wrong, and the amount of excess amount of ITC which the recipient has taken, that will be added as output liability, that will be added to his output tax liability in the following month. That is what the department does. But there is one another window here under subsection 7. The amount of ITC added in the following month's return, the amount of excess claim that is added to the output tax liability of the recipient, that can be again reduced in the next month's return if in the next month the supplier has corrected. See, I will tell you clearly, there is a mistake has been noted by the department, and it has been communicated to both supplier and recipient. 1 month time is given, that in the following return they have to, either of the person has to correct their mistake. If both the person does not correct their mistake, then automatically the department will add the excess ITC claimed by the recipient to his output tax liability. That is by default. But if the mistake is on part of supplier, but the supplier does not correct his mistake in the next month return, there is another chance for the supplier to correct the mistake in the next following month's return, because the output amount will be added in the next, after the 1 month return only in the recipient's books. If the supplier corrects during that time, during the second return from the date of communication, on that time also the recipient has an opportunity to reduce that amount which is which is corrected by the supplier. That is that opportunity is available for the recipient. So this correction can be done by the supplier any time till the date of furnishing of the September month's return of the following financial year, or filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. Till that date, the window is open for the supplier to correct his mistake. Whenever he makes the correction, that time immediately the recipient is eligible to claim that input tax credit. That is what provided under subsection 7. And subsection 8 says interest is payable. For example, if there is excess ITC claimed by the recipient and that excess ITC is confirmed, then that will be added to the output tax liability of the recipient in the following month. Along with the output tax liability for that excess, he has to pay that excess amount of GST has to be paid, along with the interest also. Interest will be paid as at the rate of 18% per annum. So that has to be paid along with the liability, output tax liability, which is added, which is in excess of the ITC is claimed. Next is subsection 9. Subsection 9 says refund of interest paid. See, for example, the excess ITC claimed has been added to the output tax liability of the recipient, and that recipient has paid that output tax liability along with the interest as well at the rate of 18%. But after 2 months of doing this, the supplier has corrected his return and the amount he has claimed is correct only. The whatever the amount the recipient has claimed, that is correct and it is eligible for the recipient. But here in this case, what happened, already the recipient, before the supplier has made the correction, the recipient has already paid the amount and along with that interest. See, when the supplier corrected, we know that under subsection 7 this amount will be available as claim, ITC for the recipient. It is like a reclaim of ITC. He can again claim that ITC amount. But what will happen to the interest which he has already paid? The recipient cannot be penalized for no mistake of him. So in that reason, whatever the interest he has paid, it has to come back to him. That is what under subsection 9 says, that whatever the interest he has paid, it will be again refunded to his electronic cash ledger. On detecting that the mistake is not on the part of recipient, the mistake is on the part of supplier, the supplier will have to pay that excess amount of taxes which he has not reported before, along with the interest. All this has happened. The interest paid by the recipient on disallowance of the credit is available as a refund for the recipient. So this is next section we are going to see is section 43. We have completed with section 42. Section 42 we saw that for the invoice. Section 43 is nothing but whatever we have seen for the purpose of invoice, it is we have to just replace with credit note. Why there is a separate section for credit note is invoices tax paid by the supplier and claimed as credit by recipient. If the supplier has raised a credit note, it means what? There is a separate document on which there is a reduction in tax liability. In that cases, if the recipient has taken the ITC based on invoice and he has not given effect for the credit note, it means what? He cannot claim that ITC which is relevant to the credit note amount. So that amount he has to reverse. So for these purposes, this section 43 is given. So section 43 says that credit note issued by supplier has to be matched with the reduction in claim by recipient of supply. See, once the supplier has issued the credit note, immediately to that extent the recipient of supply has to reduce his liability or reduce his ITC amount. That will be matched here, or any duplication of claim of credit note by the recipient. If there is any discrepancy in the nature, that means what? If there is any excess reduction in output tax liability, if the supplier has reduced that amount in excess which is not given effect by the recipient, then the same then it shall be communicated to both the persons. Similar to previous section, this discrepancy will be communicated to both the persons. Then the similar window, the time period will be provided for either of the person to correct their mistake. If that mistake is not corrected, in the previous section we saw that the excess ITC will be disallowed for the recipient and it will be added to his output tax liability. But under this section, the only difference is the excess amount of reduction he has claimed by way of credit note, that will be added back to the supplier's liability, supplier's output tax liability, and that has to be paid by the supplier, because whatever the credit claimed by the recipient, if he has not given effect to this credit note, it means what? He has claimed the ITC in excess. But here this excess ITC will not be disallowed for recipient, it will just be added back to the supplier. It means what? The department will disregard this credit note and that amount will be added back to the supplier's account, that has to be paid by the supplier as an output tax liability. So that is the only difference between section 42 and section 43. And all other provisions of section 42 as regards recipient shall apply to supplier on the similar situations. So wherever we saw that whatever the effect of recipient will be will have to be read in the supplier's point of view. That's the only major difference under these two sections. So all the remedy available under the previous section is also available here. If there is any interest paid by the supplier and in future the recipient has given effect to that credit note in his books, then this credit note, this excess will be refundable to the supplier, and any interest paid by the supplier is refundable to him in his electronic cash ledger. So whatever we have read in section 42 is similar. All the sections are at most replica in 43, with only small difference. Wherever we have seen as recipient there, we have to will have to be read as supplier here. So So clear. Then we are going to refer the relevant rules for this. Rule is rule number 69, which is matching of ITC. Following details of the invoices has to be matched. The following details will be matched by the department. The matching will happen after the due date of filing GSTR 3B, because up to GSTR 3B, the supplier or the recipient will file this GSTR 3B based on his own assessment. He will be matching himself, and he will be reporting it on a self-declaration basis in GSTR 3B. After the GSTR 3B is filed, from the department side, they will also do this matching. If there is any discrepancy, then they will communicate that. That matching will be done on what? They will match the GSTN number of supplier as well as GSTN number of recipient. These two will be matched. Next, invoice number and or debit note number of supplier and recipient will be matched. That is reported in these two returns will be matched. Next is invoice or debit note date will be matched, because it has to fall within the period. That will be matched, and the amount of tax reported by the supplier and amount of ITC claimed by the recipient will be matched. That is what the matching will happen from the department side. It will happen after the due date of filing GSTR 3 or 3B. If the time limit to file GSTR 1 or GSTR 3 or 3B is extended for a particular month by way of any circular or notification by the department, if the time limit is extended, then the time limit under this particular rule will also stand extended. It also means that this time limit also is extended. There are two explanations under this rule. Explanation 1 says, if ITC as provided in GSTR 2A is accepted without any modification, the recipient has accepted without any extra amount claim or without any modification to whatever is provided in GSTR 2A, because GSTR 2A amount is flown from GSTR 1 from the supplier. So whatever the suppliers reported in GSTR 1 will reflect in GSTR 2A, and the GSTR 2A is straight away accepted by the recipient. Then there will not be any matching, or there will not be any problem at all. Then it is considered as straight away matched. They will not do any checking, background checking of this claim by the department. There will not be any discrepancy noted. That is as per the explanation 1. Explanation 2 says, if ITC claimed by the recipient is less than the tax paid by the supplier for a particular invoice, then it is also considered as matched because that excess amount which is available as ITC, which he has short claimed, the recipient has short claimed, that does not mean there is any discrepancy. If the ITC is excess claimed, then only it is called as discrepancy. If the ITC is claimed in less as compared to the amount reported by the supplier, then it is considered as matched only. It will not be considered as discrepancy at all by the department. It means what? If the ITC claimed is in favor of department, then they will consider it as matched. They will not do any issue at all. If the ITC is claimed is unfavorable to the department, it means what? They have recipient has claimed ITC in excess, it means unfavorable to the department. Then they will find it as discrepancy, and they will send a demand notice to both these persons. That is what provided under Rule 69. Then we are going to see Rule 70. Rule 70 is a final communication. If the ITC is matched, then the department will send a final communication to both the persons. The communication will just say that your ITC is actually verified by us and it has been matched. This communication will generally be made once in a year after the year is got over. The final acceptance of ITC will be communicated to the taxpayer, to the recipient of supply. This communication will be made in form GST MIS1. That is the form on which the communication will be made by the department to the recipient of supply. Similarly, to the supplier the department will communicate to the supplier in form GST MIS2. In this form, he will communicate to the supplier saying that the ITC is matched. So, refund of any interest paid on reclaim of ITC as provided in section 42(9) or 43(9) shall be paid to electronic cash ledger by the department through GST PMT05. That is the form through which the refund will be made by the department. So, one small question which we are going to discuss now is Mr. A supplied goods to Mr. B for rupees 2 lakh rupees plus GST of 18%. The invoice number is 99 dated 5th of November 2017. Mr. B availed the ITC of 36,000 because on 2 lakh 18% is 36,000. Mr. B has availed that 36,000 as ITC and confirmed that in GSTR2. He has confirmed that by filing the GSTR2 form. However, invoice number 99 dated 5th of November 2019 is not reflected in GSTR1 of Mr. A. The GSTR1 filed by Mr. A does not include the invoice, that is invoice number 99, and he has not reported the invoice in his return. He has not paid the taxes on that as well. But however, the recipient of supply has already claimed that credit and he has confirmed that in GSTR2 as well. So there is a mismatch here, there is a discrepancy here. So we have to answer the following questions in this situation. Question A is, when matching will take place through the common portal of GST, and when the matching will take place? The matching here will take place only after the due date of filing GSTR3. So that we have already seen in Rule 69. Rule 69 says the matching by the department will be done after the due date of GSTR3. It says after the due date of GSTR3. They have not said after the filing of GSTR3. Whether or not the persons have filed GSTR3, after the due date of GSTR3, based on the information available, the department will start doing the matching. So in this case, the invoice number dated is 5th of November. So the period of invoice is November 2017. The due date for GSTR3 for this invoice is 20th of December 2017, 20th of the following month. That is the due date for GSTR3. 20th of December 2017 is the due date. The matching will happen after the due date of GSTR3. It means what, any day, any time after 20th of December. That is what the answer for this question A. Question B is, to whom discrepancy will be informed? In this case, supplier has claimed credit for which the recipient has claimed the credit, but the supplier has not reported that out that supply in his return. So the discrepancy here will be communicated to both these persons. Under section 42 subsection 3, the discrepancy will be not only communicated to one person, it will be communicated to both the parties here. So here the discrepancy will be communicated to both Mr. A and Mr. B here. Then question C is, time limit for the rectification of discrepancy. See, I told you that the matching will happen immediately after the due date of filing GSTR3. The due date of filing GSTR3 here is 20th of December 2017. Immediately after 20th of December 2017, the department will do the matching. For example, if the department does the matching on 25th of December 2017, immediately finding this discrepancy, the communication will go to both these persons. If the communication is received, for example, on 31st of December 2017, then the time period, time limit for rectifying that mistake is the next month's return. Next month's return is what? 20th of January 2018. 20th of January 2018 is the next month due date for next month's return. Before that date, this discrepancy has to be rectified. That is what the time limit for rectification of discrepancy. Answer for question 3. Question C. Question D is, whether ITC is allowed to Mr. B if Mr. A is not paid tax till 20th of January 2018. I told you that the time limit for rectification is 20th of January 2018. If till that date, if Mr. A has not reported at all, if A has not reported at all his the supply in his return, it means what? It will be termed as B has claimed that credit in excess. That ITC claimed by Mr. B will be disallowed by the department. So the answer to this question is, the amount of ITC claimed by Mr. B will be disallowed. It will not be allowed by the department if Mr. A has not paid the tax till 20th of January 2018. It means 36,000 claimed as ITC by B will add to the output tax liability of Mr. B for the month of January 2018. It means what? Before 20th of February 2018, he has to pay that amount. 36,000 has to be paid by Mr. B along with interest for 3 months. Next question E. Mr. B communicated the problem to Mr. A. Mr. B says, the amount, since you have not reported the transaction in your return, I have not allowed for this ITC. So the ITC I have claimed has been disallowed by the department. So Mr. B is communicating that problem to Mr. A. Then what Mr. A does, who looks into the issue and rectified the discrepancy and included the invoice number 99 in his GSTR 9. So the Mr. B has rectified the discrepancy in his January 2018 return. Accordingly, he paid tax on 20th of February 2018. If so, Mr. B can reduce his liability. It is already discussed that Mr. B can reduce his liability upon furnishing of information by Mr. A. If Mr. A has rectified his mistake any time before the September month's return, whenever the mistake has been rectified, immediately after that Mr. B is eligible to claim that ITC. That is how this question is being answered now. So with this small concept of returns under returns under GST laws is over. So we will be meeting again in our in next chapters in our future videos. Thank you.